Right, looks like live on fire engineering. So welcome to this month's Humpday Hangout for fire engineering with the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Looking forward to today's conversation. We got our cast of characters that we'll introduce here in a second. But once again, ISFSI wants to thank Clarion Events and Fire Engineering for allowing us this opportunity this month to discuss all things fire service training. This month, we're going to talk about something I think is facing most of the United States is our training beyond that academy. So we're going to talk about that. But a couple of things, FDIC is coming right around the corner. So it'll be April of 2023. Registration opens up in 5 days. Early enrollment for housing is opening up at the end of this month as well. So make sure you're taking advantage of the opportunities afforded to you to get in those classes early. Those hot classes always fill up quick. So make sure you're enrolling in those things and getting those figured out quickly. They're offering some huge discounts this year. So if you got multiple people from your department that are wanting to attend FDIC, there's some bulk discounts for those type of things as well. So look for those things to come out and make sure you get registered early and often. Here they got some fantastic instructors again this year, like they always do. It's every year it seems like it just tops itself. So we'll get into this today. We're going to talk about, like we said, recruit training beyond the academy. And so today I got Chief Damon Simmons from Oakland, California. And Assistant Chief Steve Shaw from the Fort Lauderdale area in Florida. We'll start. Chief, how are you guys doing down there post Hurricane Ian?
It's been a wild ride for us down in the South Florida area, Florida in general, that is. And, it's one of those things where, some of us have missed the storm. Some of us were not impacted as directly as we could have been. But obviously, as we've seen through the videos and the pictures that are out there, some parts of our state have just been absolutely devastated, and I use that word very intentionally. They've been devastated. Between roads being washed out, isolating people on different islands, between houses literally being just taken up and just decimated, it has been a significant hit to us. I will say that overall, when you look at the resources that are now being funneled into that area, those areas across the state, across the area, it is comforting to know that there's a lot of people that are wanting to help. From the local, from the volunteer side, from the paid side, from the state, from the federal resources, people just pouring in there trying to do their best to help navigate through this absolute catastrophe. So it's troubling to watch, but it's nice to know that there's a lot of people, a lot of support funneling in there to help do what we can to get them back to whatever this is going to look like when it's all done. But it's changed the landscape of things.
Yeah, I know part of the Missouri Task Force One. Obviously, I didn't go, but we got a contingent of team members down there in the Fort Myers area, and they're doing good work down there. So good to see, whenever something like that hits, unfortunately hits part of our country, it's one of those times that, everybody comes together, unifies, and tries to get the job done, which is what we're all about. So
100%.
I think so. It's good stuff there. Damon, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. And just to echo those same sentiments to our fellow citizens out in the great state of Florida, keeping you in our prayers. Florida is near and dear to me because my niece is a second-year student at Bethune-Cookman University out in Daytona Beach. I've been watching it, and I'm also part of California Task Force 4. So we are ready to go. Hopefully we will not be needed. That meaning that you guys are safe, but if need be, we're ready to respond. Doing well. Getting ready for our fourth quarter training over here in the city of Oakland Fire Department. As all of us, we're busy. A lot of stuff going on in the training division. In addition to that, we're getting ready for the launch of our first quarter training in 2023 and putting together our strategic training and education plan for 2023. So thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. No, it's always good when you get to these two guys on a conversation going. I always end up taking notes and going back and looking at everything that was said just to try to recap, because it's always good. So let's start. We're going to talk about beyond the academy, but I think we need to set the foundation. So talk about our current academies and what we have, and regionally, if they're a regional academy, if it's a not everybody's got an academy. So, for us in St. Louis, we're, a fragmented fire service, if you will, but it works 43 different fire departments in St. Louis County where I work at, but we have one St. Louis County Fire Academy that everybody goes through. So everybody gets the same standardized training. It brings everybody that firefighter 1 and 2 standard. We threw a couple other things in there with some rope trainings and those sort of things, probably consistent with a lot across the board. But it's about it's a 14-week program. We offer 3 of those annually through our academy. So it's either a lottery system, so people can apply. There's points given for being a paramedic and those sort of things, or a fire department could put you through. I was pretty fortunate back in the day, 20-something years ago, that a fire department picked me up and sent me through as a medic. So I was fortunate there. So a blended there, but they cover, like we said, all the stuff there. So I've often thought, is 14 weeks not enough? Is 14 weeks too much? It used to be 10 weeks when I went through. So it's grown in there in time. And it's the standard Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day training academy. So I don't, Damon, are you guys, does the city of Oakland have their own academy, or are you guys a regional, or how do you guys do it in there in California?
So yes, we have our own academy, and our academy is through, we are certified through the state. We are what's called an ALA, which stands for Accredited Local Academy. And so our academy, we use a combination of the state Firefighter 1 and 2 Academy, which covers the structure, hazmat, and being from the state of California, the wildland component, which I know is not common in all academies throughout the United States. And then, of course, we insert some themes and topics that are OFD specific in regards to engine company operations, truck company operations, and miscellaneous items. In our academies, when I first came in 20-some years ago, it was a 16-week academy. And all we did every day for 16 weeks, literally, was pull hose and through ladders. That's all we did. And we had maybe 1 or 2 days of hazmat throw. Fast forward to today, our academy experience is vastly different. Our last few academies have been abbreviated. We've been hiring a lot of lateral firefighters, so we've been putting them through 6 and 8 week academies. And as you mentioned earlier, you can never find that fine point of regards to how long the academy should be. Some people, 14 weeks is too much, not enough. And so we make do, and we just emphasize to our folks, no matter how long the academy is, training and education should be a lifelong endeavor, as long as you are in the fire service.
I like that. It's funny because a lot of people either pay for their own academy, right? So you see that, we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we go. They'll pay that initial time. They'll figure out how to make that 16 week, the 10 week, the 14 week work in their life. But then, and I'm sure we'll talk about more as we go, but how do you re-engage that person so that when that 8 hour day is on their 4 day off, hey, I need you to take 8 hours to go better yourself. Oh man, that's my time. I either need to pay for it. I need your travel. I need you to give me a meal ticket. I need to provide every opportunity to make this work. But in the initial start, when they were just getting on the job, so that'll be part of it too. So Steve, what about down in Florida? What are you guys doing down there?
Well, let me make sure I understand the question. So you're asking about what the general fire academies look like throughout the area and the state. Is that the question we're starting with?
So Fort Lauderdale, I want to come on the job at Fort Lauderdale. What's that academy going to look like, and
Gotcha.
and length, and kind of some of those things, just a foundation, so we can kind of start off with that.
Right. So we're on the same page as Damon. Where in Florida, we have a state academy that provides the minimum standards, which is Firefighter 1 and 2. And I think the numbers now are up to, about 490 some odd hours for the academy. And basically that is disseminated however the academies, the local ones throughout the state, can do it, whether it's 14 weeks-ish through one shot, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, or a night class, which may take anywhere between 3 to 6 months, depending on the schedule that fire academy decides to put out. Content is generally the same. And for the most part, that's where we start. So if you want to get a job in Florida, let's say, you have to go to those minimum standards, and then you start the process there. Now in Florida, a lot of the areas, especially in the Southeast, you also have to be an EMT, and most of the time a paramedic. So that's another additional hurdle you got to cross to get a job, depending on where you want to work. As you go into Central Florida, North Florida, those medical requirements aren't so stringent, but it depends where you want to go. But generally speaking, starting out, that's what the entry-level firefighters got to do. Now, when they transition to their individual departments, wherever they get hired, that's when they go into their own academies. And those academies vary from 1 week to 6 months, depending on where you go. And that's where, and I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit too, in terms of what that looks like. But there's a wide berth of let's say, differences between one department and the other. Generally, we try to, in talking to a lot of the departments around the state and knowing a lot of those individuals, some of them struggle with that 1 or 2 or very minimal time frame they get to take what they learned in the academy and transition it to what they're going to see in the streets. Some with the longer ones, 10, 12, 16 weeks, 6 months in some cases. They have that better ability to kind of make it make sense more, I guess. But yeah, generally speaking, to answer your question, that's where we all start from, at least in the state of Florida. And there's some transition opportunities if you're coming from another state. We have one guy that's starting with us this week from the Tennessee area. So there's ways to transfer over and whatnot, but that's kind of where we're starting.
What about Drew, to Tennessee to Florida? Maybe it's that beautiful beach. I don't know.
Everybody wants to come to Florida. Everybody wants.
Why would you not? Right. In Florida, why would you not want to come down? It's beautiful. No, I think it's interesting though. So a crazy component, right? So essentially we have the entire country covered. I got the Midwest, you got the West Coast, the East Coast here. So and there's still this variation of what a fire academy length is and kind of what that fire academy, we all know that we're going to follow the 1001 NFPA standard. We're going to hit the JPRs and those sort of things, but there's still the intricacies of demand with the wildland urban interface and the need for, forced firefighting. Same thing probably down in Florida. Some of that occurs. We got some different, urban fires in Missouri, but by no means do we get the large wildland fires like you guys get. So, the intricacies is interesting. So after the academy, these guys come on the job, these guys and gals get hired on, then we put them through another set of training. Right. So I kind of equate this, and Steve, you brought up a great point. It's like, on the fire side of it, you were talking about being a paramedic and EMT and those sort of things. I think that's great because in St. Louis, everybody's got to be a paramedic, and we're cross-staffed, cross-trained, but we don't run them through EMS scenarios, right? So like we hire a medic, we don't put them through EMS scenarios per se, but as a firefighter, we, for whatever reason, right, they come on the job, we're like, hey, we want to see you pull a hose. We want to see you put your SCBA on. They've checked all the boxes. Maybe it's just my department, I don't know. But they checked all the boxes to get their firefighter 1 and 2 certificate, just like a medic license, but we still put them through this. And I'm not saying it's bad. I just, you guys seen the same stuff or?
Okay, so where do I start with this? Okay, so in terms of that transition, actually, I think what you're talking about. So I'll start with the local. I think that this is where the opportunity comes into play in terms of that internal academy. Once you're done with the state academy, when you come in on to another to your fire department, that's the opportunity. In other words, to take what you've learned and tie it into your locality. And you mentioned it could go a couple good points in terms of the specialties you may have to deal with that I don't, and vice versa. The wildland firefighting, for example. Do we have that in Florida? Absolutely. 100% we do. Now, do I have it in Fort Lauderdale? No, I got a bush in the corner that every so often somebody might throw a cigarette in and whatnot, but we don't have the extent of that issue that some of the other states around the country do. Now, do we have different challenges? 100%. And I think we mentioned this in one of the last Humpday Hangouts in terms of our regional or geographical challenges where, the hurricane is a good example. We do get flooding. We do get hurricanes that come through. So what do we have to know to do? We have to know how to battle extra forcible entry constraints from impact glass, heavily reinforced overhead doors, and we can go on and on. So this is our opportunity to make sure we're training at that local level. Firefighting is local, right? That opportunity right there is to make sure not only do you have the basics, but you know how to do your job. You have to be the best at what you do. And what you do, yes, firefighting is firefighting, but there's a lot of things that you do that some other departments do. That don't do, that is. So in terms of that transition, that's the challenge, making sure that they know what they're doing beyond the academy, like you mentioned before. Now, we also, in Fort Lauderdale, in our area, we're an aggressive interior firefighting department. And we're very vocal and very intentional about making sure that when you come in, you know that. Because some people don't know. They have a lot of variety to choose from in the area, wherever they want to go. They have to understand from day one, this is what we do. We are an aggressive, busy, interior firefighting department, and we train them as such. They may have learned the basics in the academy, but then we take that and finesse it and make it an art because we have very specific ways that we want you to see you pull the hose and nozzle selection and all that. Everything from high rises to mid rises to garden apartments to your traditional bread and butter, CBS construction, single family structure house fires. We're very specific about it, though. We're very aggressive and we teach that way. It's a culture we have. On the same token, for the EMS side, we're very new with the EMS, only being, let's say, 20, 25 years in, but we're up and coming, we're learning a lot, we're improving all the time. But in terms of that transition, in terms of the opportunity to teach during that time frame, that's where I think of a lot. In fact, my role now is the assistant chief over training in EMS. Why am I so supportive? Now, again, this is where I struggled with for a long time. I was always an instructor. I was always that guy out in the field doing things. And being in my role now, I still struggle with that. In other words, I want to be out there, but I know my role. So what is my role now? My role is supporting training in EMS. Now, how do I support training? And why do I support the ridiculous amount of time we put in there, the 10 weeks of training, the PT, the reps, that ridiculous amount of training we make them do, they're not only during that 10 weeks of training, but then that full year after that. Why do I support that? Because just as you guys know, we know what they're responsible for on day one. When they hit that rig the first time, whether they have 30 years in the job or 30 seconds, you never know what's coming down the pike. And we have to be preparing them for that first day. So this is why I'm so supportive of the rigors and the stresses, and that stress everywhere from psychological to physical to social to all that, because we're preparing them for what they're going to have to know on day one and through the rest of their career. And I might be drifting a little bit from the response, but I think that's the point here in terms of that initial response and that initial academy we're putting them through. It's a first impression. It's a first impression from your department. So the choice of who are your instructors, who are the people that are modeling the behaviors you want them to see when they're first coming on the job is so important. We pride ourselves in saying the people that you have in front of you are the best of the best. These are the people we want you to see as a representation of our entire organization, and they will teach you our ways. That way, when you're stepping out there, they know, oh, I understand. There's no gray area. There's no misconception. This is what they want to see. I got it. And then we go into the skills, whether it's pulling a line, throwing a ladder, or everything else. But it's so critical on that part, that first impression standpoint, that first impression of what they're going to expect the rest of their career. And that's so important because as we talk about recruitment and retention and the challenges we're having, let's face it, some people, when they get the job, you want to make sure they're very well versed in what the expectations are. And every so often we'll hear, man, this isn't what I signed up for. Well, let's get that out of the way right now. Let's make sure you understand fully, because you're about to take a 20, 25, 30-year investment here. Let me make sure you're absolutely comfortable with what we expect of you. And then we go to town. So it's, I guess, to summarize this, that academy, whatever it is, a week, 2 weeks, 6 months, whatever it is, regardless of the content, regardless of the idea of making sure you're doing the best to make sure your folk are prepared tactically, strategically, whatever, it's that first impression mindset, making sure that they understand the culture that they're getting into and that they can either get on board with it and make sure they're at the right place, or maybe it's not for them and they want to go somewhere else. That's our duty as trainers, to make sure that they're understanding the culture they're about to get involved with.
So, Damon, I'll parlay to you here is, so when you're, Steve was mentioning about, the instructors, particularly the instructors, because that's their first impression of the fire department, first impression of actually what's going on. In Oakland, with your academy, I mean, how are you selecting your instructors for that? I mean, I'm sure that they got to be good firefighters, but how much of that culture aspect of it are you laying into?
Correct. And first of all, Chief Shaw, he pretty much summed it all up. So it's kind of hard to.
He always does on us. He always does.
But to answer your question in terms of instructor selection, and as Chief Shaw mentioned, that is very important. In a perfect world, our instructors that we bring down to the drill tower are individuals that are also modeling the behavior out in the company. And what I mean by modeling behavior, they're the ones that are engaging in training and education every day out there at the company level. So when these individuals come down to the drill tower for that 6 weeks or 8 weeks of 16 weeks of training, we bring them down at least 2 to 3 weeks in advance, and we make sure all of our curriculum is intact. All of our resource needs, all the resources that we need for that academy experience are there. And one of the things that we really emphasize to our instructor cadre is that you are coming down here to teach and educate these young men and women who are coming through, whether this is their first firefighter opportunity or they are laddering over from another fire department, is to train and educate. And one of those things that we sort of have in this fire service culture, maybe just an open thing, instructors come down, one person, he or she has to be the good cop, another person has to be a bad cop. I don't subscribe to that. And as a training director, I don't allow that type of mentality to take place. You are a trainer and you are an educator, and that is the expectation. Also, these young men and women who are coming through that academy experience, they're highly impressionable. So it's important that we teach them the right things to say, the right things to do as it relates to all aspects of our profession. We require all of our instructors at a minimum to have an Instructor 1 certification. And while we don't make it a hard requirement, but we require that academy director, that lead instructor, for him or her to have that Instructor 2 experience. And then the last thing that we do to really make it a good learning environment, and this is no different than what fire departments all across the United States do, is that we have a rigorous curriculum, lesson plan, and we expect the instructors to follow that so that we are providing the right information in the right way to perform all the skills that are associated with our profession, so that when these young men and women hit the companies, they are ready to go. Because that's the expectations of our citizens. When the 911 call comes in, Miss Johnson, she expects that engine company, that truck company, when they arrive at her house, to be highly trained, competent, and respectful. And we emphasize that culture of being a student of the profession to learning all aspects of the craft. And one of the things that we really emphasize in our academy is a good comprehension of both fire dynamics / fire behavior and building construction, along with good fundamentals of water application. And I say that we had 2 great alarm incidents last week, and we were doing a post-incident evaluation. And I tell my guys and gals that work on truck companies, trucks do not put out fire. They support engine company operation. It's highly trained men and women on hose lines with sufficient water, applying quick water and applying it correctly that put out fires. And that's coming from an individual who spent over 20 some years working at double houses and enjoying that engine life.
I love it. I love it. So let's transition now. We've talked about the foundation of the academies. So, part of this is going to be beyond the academy, right? The major component. What do you guys see is the hardest bridge to make for your guys? So, that the new recruit, say it's not a lateral move. So say it's the new firefighters coming on the job, maybe has some experience in EMS prior to, or maybe some small experience in their other department, but now they're hitting the big city, right? They're hitting the Fort Lauderdale, hitting the Oakland. Maybe they were never used, like myself. We don't have trucks and engines in St. Louis, so now I'm coming to that. So what gap is missing, and what training is happening at that company level to ensure proficiencies? I know Chief Shaw had mentioned a little bit about that first year and kind of continuing the academy through. What's going on? Like, what's that training plan looking like for that first year out, and keys to success? For anybody that's watching, right? Maybe there's somebody that's watching. It's like, hey, I'm getting a new recruit next month. My first time ever having a new guy. I'm not sure exactly what to do. I'm a new officer. I'm going to have a new recruit. Speak to those. Let's speak to those guys a little bit and parlay into that. So I'll go Chief Shaw. What do you got?
So a couple of the things that come up in my mind of what you're talking about, in other words, especially the people that are listening to this podcast right now, in terms of those tactical takeaways, and those people that are maybe potentially looking to start a class right now, or in the middle of one, like we just are onboarding 25 right now. This is the first week of 10 weeks. And some of the things that immediately come up are things like mentoring, and make sure they have the proper perspective. Let's start with mentoring. I was talking to somebody recently, and we happen to have a new mentoring program we've established over the last couple of years. And when it first came out, as we were deploying it, and as the individuals who were running it were kind of making it work, I'm thinking, my God, do we have the option to do mentoring? Is mentoring even an option anymore with the quantity and the responsibility that we're asking upon these individuals who are starting. Because you can look at the content right now. I was just staring at our cadet manual for the first year before we started this, and I'm just in awe, and I still am sometimes, of the quantity that's in there that we are making them responsible for. And as I'm looking through all this, between the medical, which is basically an internship, if you look at our paramedic sign-off process, which is beautiful, it's a beautiful thing, it's basically an internship. When you look at the amount of fire training and tactics and strategies and extrication and basic levels of at least understanding some of the technical rescue aspect of what we do, oh my gosh, there's a lot we're asking of them. So my question to you is, in terms of mentoring, is mentoring even an option? I mean, at this point we have it, but now that we're looking at it, oh my gosh, this is part of what we do now. We need this portion to make sure we have another angle to help them get through and balance everything they have to learn and experience and start to understand as they transition this first year. It is not easy. Look, compared to what we have now to 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I first started, ridiculous improvements and ridiculous amounts of content. So the mentoring is one of the first things I'm thinking of. And I know that that's probably another subject for another day. Several podcasts have been done on mentoring and fire engineering. And I suggest the listener to look up those. And there are several subject matter experts out there in many departments across the country that have really good dedicated programs. I would highly suggest people that if you're not mentoring right now, or more of it's informal, bring it to that next level. It's more of a formalized process, because of what we're asking of everybody these days. It's important. And not only that, it aids to the culture. It aids to the culture. Okay, what are you saying if you're not supporting your firefighters in trying to learn all this stuff? With that mentoring platform, you're showing them, hey, we do care about you. Here's another way we're trying to help you navigate through all of this. Shows that you care, that you want them to succeed. So the first thing I think of is the mentoring. If you're not doing it, at this point, I don't know if there's an argument to be made to not do it these days. Let's start there. The second thing is, and I always go to this word, and you'll have to forgive me. You know, my favorite word is perspective. Okay, it's my favorite catchphrase. I love the word perspective, but I think that's really important in the beginning, that you make things very clear to people that are starting this profession, that a couple things in terms of perspective. One, change. Change is going to happen, and they need to understand that. They need to know that change is an inevitability. It's going to change. What looks like today will not look like the way it is 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Change is a friend. Change is going to happen. Get used to it, because it's going to change. But be comfortable with it. And the second thing is just some of the tactical things that we do. For example, medical calls. Oh my gosh, I ran 20 BLS calls yesterday. They're all bullcrap. No, you ran 20 medical calls that happened to be non-ALS in nature, that when you transported them, you had that extra experience of seeing more and more patients, more and more hands-on, more reps, so that when the ALS calls, when the serious calls drop, that you go, you know what? I may not know what this is, but it's not normal. Let me check this out. That idea of what you're doing is not a waste of time. It's not bull crap. It's actually good experience. You're getting your reps and you're getting your experience. You get to practice the skills that you were taught to do. Some are a little mundane sometimes. Some are a little bit frustrating. But you know, when we talk about the building of our culture, the building of our people that eventually take on the roles that we are in right now. I want those people to not only have had the reps, had the experiences, had the struggles, had the challenges. That's going to build them up for succession planning in the future to take on the roles that we have to sit right now. And I have to say that with a very careful way, because we do understand that we're struggling out there. We do understand that there's mandatories and lots of overtime and struggles like we've never had before. So we do empathize, we do feel that. But at the same time, those experiences are helping them thicken their skin, get experience, and preparing them for the next levels as they go through the chain. So those are the first things I think about what's missing in terms of whether it's the first 10 weeks or during that first year, is making sure that, one, if there's ability to mentor, take it. And if it's not there, find out a reason why you're not doing it, because at this point, it's essential. And the second part of that is the perspective, making sure that people understand that everything they do, whether it's pulling a hose line or helping somebody replant a plant in the house that you happen to run over with a stretcher to get in, everything they do matters. Everything they do can be turned into a positive. Everything they do at some level can be looked at as a positive perspective on everything that we do, regardless of what that task is. So those are the first things I think of in terms of what's, I say, missing, I guess, in the first time, whether it's academy or that first year.
So I'm partly I'm speaking of that too. I saw something today as I was walking into a meeting was obstacles and opportunities. And I think if we try to take that first year and look at more things as opportunities, to your point of the 20 BLS calls, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, I love the guys that have been on the job for 6 months and they're already burned out because they ran too many EMS calls the day before. And I'm like, you just got on the job, bro. And to your point, but and I love this because you said it is the reps, but that'll be the same guy that's in the gym, right? That does, 16 supersets with his arms to get big, understanding that reps are what build muscle memory and muscle, and you need those reps both physically but mentally. And so
the last thing I'll say with that, Brian, is this. And again, from my level right now as a higher level chief, my job is not tactical, it's more supportive. So going back to the empathy part, I empathize, I understand the struggles. And my job is to try to find a way from my angle to put more trucks on the road, put more people out there, support them as best they can, while making sure that what they do matters. And that's the challenge, the guy like me in this office has these days.
So we just got Chief Halton jumped on here. So welcome, Chief Halton. Thank you for joining us today with this great Humpday Hangout. I'm sure you're aware, but we're talking everything beyond the academy. So any insights for us? We'll switch to Damon here, but Chief Halton, any insights we've kind of laid down the foundation of the fire academy, what it looks like in different regions, but what that first year looks like for that new firefighter coming on the job. We're trying to essentially speak to that, maybe that new captain that's got a new firefighter and what they should be thinking, or for the captain that's never had a new firefighter, they're getting one next week. So thoughts on that?
Well, first, let me apologize for being late. Some things you can control, other things you can't control. So I had something I could not control, a higher power, namely Mrs. Halton and my doctors demanded my presence. So I apologize for that. But I think that one of the things that's interesting, and I had this conversation, I've been having this conversation all over the country lately, which is fascinating, is that I personally think that we need to raise our standards and do a better job. We need to focus 80% of our attention on who we recruit and then how we mold them to be leaders, right? In other words, to Steve's point, we're all leading all the time. It only matters whether we're doing it well or poorly. And to Steve's point about if you're coming in with the gurney and you knock over a potted plant and you take the time to repot the plant, so to speak, if it's allowable, right? In other words, if that's that discretionary time or manpower allows it. I mean, don't stop to repot the plant if CPR is needed, to prioritize correctly. But that in itself is a leadership moment. That's a modeling moment, not only for you and your crew, but for the people you're doing it for, right? Like taking responsibility for your actions, being accountable, right? And although it's just a potted plant, you don't know what the significance of that potted plant might be to that family, or just you taking the time to clean up the mess that you made. That's a big lesson. And I think in the academy and in our entire career, every time we have one of those opportunities to do something for someone, we should take it. And I always like to throw out books that I think are wonderful. And one of my favorite books of all time is called Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception. And it's a cool little book. You can read it literally in a half hour, 45 minutes. It's out by the Arbinger Institute, Leadership and the Art of Self-Deception. And the premise is pretty straightforward. Just about every minute of every day, you have an opportunity to do something for someone else, inadvertently, unless you find a quiet spot in the woods to read a book, if you're at work or at home. And one of the examples they cite in the book is something I think everyone on the call can relate to. You come home from work, it's been a long day, you get the kids to bed, you got a young baby in the house, you go to sleep and the baby starts to cry an hour or so after you lay down. You have two options there, right? You can roll over and pretend to be asleep and let your wife get up or your husband get up and go take care of the baby, or you can get up, right? At my stage in life, it's the cat meowing in the middle of the night. Or if my sons are crying, we got a whole other set of issues. So in their mid 40s, it'd be a problem. But if you get up, life goes on, everything's good. It's you feel good about yourself, you feel good about everything else. If you roll over and pretend to be asleep or pretend you didn't hear it, and your wife or your husband gets up and they go take care of business and they come back, you'll lay there for a few minutes and you'll think, well, I had a long day. The demands of my job. I'm a chief officer in a major metropolitan. I'm a chief officer in Oakland Fire Department. I'm a chief officer in Fort Lauderdale. I'm a busy guy. I'm a busy gal. I've got, I work hard. I bring home the paycheck. She was home all day, or he doesn't work as hard as I work, and I'm and I don't know why she's putting that on me. Why should? Because you start feeling a little bit guilty, and rather than accept guilt, we project guilt. We project responsibility, and right there, you're deceiving yourself. It's self-deception. All you had to do was get up. You know what I mean? All you had to do is be honest, or even just roll over and say, "Hey, sweetheart, whatever you call your significant other, knucklehead, I'm dog tired. Do you mind taking care of the cat or getting the baby or whatever?" But when we fail to do that, it's like when our buddy says, "Hey, I'm moving Wednesday. You mind coming by with your pickup truck?" And you're like, "Yeah, I got that. I got a body waxing appointment that day, or I'm having nasal hairs removed, or whatever." You come up with some lame excuse. The other side of it is if you're just honest and say, "Hey, Tom, Wednesday, it's a long day for me. Could we look at Thursday? Could we look at Friday? That would be even better than deceiving them, right? Because once you start to deceive, or once you start to shirk accountability or opportunity, it's a bad road. And we all see that. We see people, and it accumulates, right? Like we always say, friends come and go, enemies accumulate. So does guilt. So does negative habits. The more times you repeat something, the more apt you're to do it. So I think as we mold our leaders, and to Stephen's point, and I'm sorry I didn't get to hear Damon's thoughts, and I can't wait to hear them. The little things do matter. You know what I mean? Because everything's predicated on the little things, and skill sets are important, muscle memory is important, technical competency is important. But what's even more important is self-awareness. Who are you? What do you stand for? Is it integrity, loyalty, duty, service? And then what are you really willing to fight for? What are you willing to, say, no, I won't. Oh, that's a line I won't cross. That's something I won't do, or that's something I will fight for. You know what I mean? And that self-awareness is a big part of what you need to nurture in the academies. In other words, help people discover who they are. And it's okay, because we're all different, and they might have an ideology or a mission that's very different than yours. So talk about it, learn from them, it's an opportunity for you to grow, for them to grow, and I think that's when I look at our academies, I think we do a great job on the hard skills, the technical stuff. I think we do a great job on the rules and regs and the physical training. And I think where we always need to focus more is personal development, self-awareness. It's different for all of us, right? So and that's okay. Different members are going to say, well, quietly meditating or reading a book, that doesn't work for me. I got to go, saw wood, or I got to go, I got whatever it is. You at some point you have to find an acceptance within yourself to let other people go down their road. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a lot of thoughts in there.
No, I think to your point, I was just thinking as you're talking, in the academies, you just mentioned, like, we do all these great tactical things, but one of the things that I noticed from teaching the academies is we don't ever tell anybody how lucky they are they walked in the fire service. We don't tell them, like, man, you're getting ready to get the greatest job in the world.
But if we teach them to lead, and we teach them to be accountable and responsible, all that other stuff will work itself out. Then you don't need to have a book of, so it's interesting. God gave Moses 10 commandments. And I'll guarantee if I pull out the book for Oakland or Fort Lauderdale, there's more than 10 commandments in there. I'm just going to go out and live. And every single one of them has a name next to them. A couple say Shaw, a couple say Simmons, a couple say Halton, a couple say Zaitz, or as I like to say, Zaitz.
Okay.
But you know what I mean? So I think that I sometimes we overthink things, and sometimes we don't think deeply enough about things. Who are you? Well, What do you stand for? What are you willing to fight for? And the same thing for the organization. What does Oakland Fire stand for in the community? You know, what does Fort Lauderdale stand for? What does Kirkwood stand for? You know, what's Limestone stand for? You know, interesting.
Taman, what about you? What do you, after the academy and still in that Oakland culture and setting those guys up for success? And
Yeah, Doug telling off both Chief Shaw and Chief Halton, from that graduation date to that retirement date, from 0.5 months to 30 years, the question was asked earlier about what are some gaps. And the gap is not on that new firefighter side. The young men and women coming into the profession today, they're highly intelligent, they're enthusiastic about all aspects of the job, and they really, really want to learn. The gap is on the side of the company and chief officers in regards to the continuance of training and education. As Chief Halton mentioned, we do an excellent job, whether it's Kirkwood, Albuquerque, Oakland, Fort Lauderdale, during that academy experience in terms of the reps, engine company operation reps, truck company operation reps, building construction, fire dynamics, EMS, hazmat, in our case, wildland. We tend to fall off in some cases, and I'm making a general statement, so charge it to my head and not my heart. Making a general statement is that the gap is when these individuals enter the companies, they go into the fire stations. There's some great officers out there, company officers and chief officers who instill discipline, who instill continuance of training and education. And then there are some where there is a room for improvement. When I was a company officer, I called it the 222 rule. You give me 2 hours a day of dedicated training and education, and you can have the other 22 hours to yourself unless Ms. Johnson calls. Ms. Johnson, she has every right to use any of those 24 hours to take care of her needs. And if we just look at that, the 222, and no matter if you work in a company where you're running 10 runs a day or 20 runs a day, we all have enough downtime to dedicate to 2 hours of training and education. So company officers and chief officers that are out there listening, it's your and our responsibilities to continue with the mission of the fire service and our values and our traditions. And our values and traditions revolve around hard work, dedication, and love for the profession. And if you would just cater your day-to-day activities to satisfy hard work, dedication, learning, and love for the craft, some of these issues and challenges that we're having across the fire service, and I hear, new firefighters coming in today, they don't understand this, they don't understand that. That's our responsibility to train and educate them. They don't know everything, and they shouldn't. That's where that academy experience is key. You mentioned earlier about instructors. Having good instructors who are educators, teachers, and leaders to instill discipline, instill a high work ethic. That's where that comes into place. Because unfortunately, sometimes we plant good seeds in bad soil. These individuals coming out of these academies, they're highly impressionable. They want to learn. They want to serve. That's why they signed up to call themselves professional firefighters. What are we doing as company officers and chief officers from graduation date of the academy to year 30 when they retire? What are we doing in between that time period to keep them motivated and maintain that high level of competency? We had a young man, I was on a conference call yesterday with Chief Halton on another matter. A young man came into the office. He had about 3 to 4 years on a job. Because of the training and education that we provided, not only in the academy, but also through our continual in safety and survival training, he saved the lives of 3 individuals at a high-rise incident that we went to. And that is a fact. That's not one person's opinion on it. He saved the lives of 3 individuals because of his training and education. And I can say this because I did this when I was a kid. I threw papers. I was a paper boy. I flipped burgers at McDonald's. Matter of fact, I was flipping burgers at McDonald's shortly after the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake. Now, we know flipping burgers and throwing papers, yeah, you can get hit by a car, and I was hit by a car, as a paper boy, but the chances of suffering an injury or death on the job is slim to none. However, in our profession, we know that we're all one call away from not coming back home. And there's probably only 2 other professions that could say the same thing, that being our military and our law enforcement, where they're in that same predicament. So company officers and chief officers, that's my challenge to you. Whether you work for Oakland, Kirkwood, Albuquerque, Fort Lauderdale, and any other 30,000 plus fire departments across the United States, keep your people engaged.
And I think just to dovetail on what Damon was just talking about, the number one thing that enabled that young man to do what he did was character. He put those other 3 individuals above his own. He could have bolted and saved himself, and no one would have thought any worse of him. He was in that type of a situation. We don't have time to go into the whole story, but it's an amazing story. And he didn't even think of it. He didn't even consider it. It was he recognized his other teammates were in peril and assumed all of that risk nonetheless to save them, and did it and completed it, which is it's like when you read the stories about the fellow who pulls up on a car accident and lifts the truck off the trap, drive or whatever. It's like that incredible, it's like superhuman. But and when you meet this young man, he's like, you feel like you're meeting Jimmy Stewart, or you know what I mean? He's like, oh shucks, weren't nothing. You know what I mean? You're like, holy cow, son. No, it's like one of the most inspirational stories I've ever heard from the fire service. Just truly wonderful. And I think, Nick Salama, who always is a wonderful part of our show. I always want him to call in. He always ends up just texting us. He's just talking about the evolution of the academy, and I agree with him. I think our academies need to keep abreast of everything else, and I think part of that is character development. In other words, a lot of the young folks we get today are looking for role models, or looking for strong men and women in their lives, because that may have been lacking, and not of their own doing, and not because their folks weren't good people, but the world has become such a incredibly complicated, demanding place that, say you have a large cadre of children, sometimes that child, what do they call it, the forgotten child, that child, it kind of slips between the cracks, and when they join the fire service, they might look to you, they might look to one of their instructors, and so to your point earlier, I think it was Steve who said, every minute of every day somebody's watching you, and and it matters. It really matters. You're really never off duty once you decide to join our profession. I don't care where you are, and you got to keep that in the back of your head, especially if you go to senior leadership. You know what I mean? It's interesting how, and we lose that perspective. We all do, and I think it's part of our character, if you will, is that we always, like, I meet folks and I'm in awe. I'm looking up to them, and I'm I don't know. I just still react that way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Probably a better way to say that. I'm giving you word salad here. What do you think, Steve? Are you still with us?
I'm digesting everything that's being talked about. And that is the one thing that every time we do this show, I'm telling you, I sit here and just digest and digest because of all the things we cover. And that's, I think, the value of this is as people are listening, I'm sure they're doing exactly what we're doing. We're just sitting there digesting, trying to rationalize. Are we doing this? Are we practicing this? Oh, I didn't think about that. There's just so much content that's being thrown around, and the trying to stick with what we're trying to do is a challenge. Because you said, even just in the last few, all right, not to go off tangent, but I'm gonna go off a little bit. Just in the last few minutes, some of the words you mentioned, the powerful words like modeling behaviors, modeling, like you said, we're on Front Street 24/7. We're on Front Street 24/7 in the fire service. And as officers, especially chief officers or company officers, that mid-level management, we're always on Front Street. They're watching every move we make, everything we say. Now, the challenge is our actions matching our words? Are we modeling what we want to see out there? Whether it's the way we communicate, whether it's our actions on scene, all of that jazz. I think that sometimes we forget that. I'll be the first one to admit, sometimes I forget that. I have to watch what I say, make sure what I'm saying is coming from a good place, coming from the character part of myself, but then are my actions matching that? You mentioned the opportunities that are out there. Every day is full of opportunities, every single day. I was talking to somebody this morning coming up to my firehouse. And I was walking up, and this is actually a quote from my boss, Chantel. She says in the morning, she's got a choice. She can make a left, go up the elevator, get off the elevator, go right into her office, and she ain't seeing nobody. If she makes a right and goes up the back stairwell, goes to the second floor, happens to see some of those people, she may get stuck there for 30 minutes, an hour and a half, just having conversations. But she gets to feel the pulse of the people, gets to have those conversations, gets to be seen, gets to feel the pulse of what's going on. It's a choice. There's choices like that every single day. So I think that the last thing I'll say is, you said this, people are looking for role models, they're looking for leaders. They want to be led. And we've been talking about this internally in our department just recently. People want to be led. They're looking for people to be leaders. All you got to do is step up and lead. That's it. It's simple. It's not easy. And a lot of things are like that. But yeah, I know that I'll go back to Brian. I know you had a schedule. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but, but that's the value of these conversations, is bringing up those things that is not just happening with me locally or Damon on the West Coast. It's happening everywhere. If we were just small subsections and subcultures of the whole fire service, the whole American fire service, and these are good conversations. And I'm glad that we get to the point where we're like, oh crap, we better cut it off, because otherwise we'll be here all day. I'm glad that we do this.
And I'm Chief Zaitz. I'm looking at the comment that Pete just posted from Nick, and part of he says, "Are we teaching from the most up-to-date content or dated books?" Now I'm putting my instructor
fire engineering books.
Now I'm putting my instructor 1 and 2 hat on. It's important that, as from that academy perspective, we have curriculum that's up to date. We have lesson plans and skill sheets that match the expectations of when they're out in the companies. Oftentimes we have this dichotomy where there's the academy way and the real world way. We got to get beyond that. There should be one way. What we teach in the academy should be the expectation when they're now operating out in the companies. And it's our job as instructor 1s and 2s, training directors, chiefs, captains, is to make sure that everything is up to date in regards to curriculum content.
And I think to that point, Damon, also, and this dawned on me recently, and I'll make a shameless plug. There is a book called Know Your Buildings that we publish. And we all have read Brannigan's Building Construction, and it's a wonderful book, but it's obtuse, right? It's a thick, kind of nuanced book to read, and God bless Chief Brannigan, was a dear friend, very good to me. I admire him. His family's wonderful, Glenn Corbett. Know Your Buildings is the book we should be using in recruit school, company officer school, and I really think through the rank of battalion chief. Maybe when we get into assistants and deputies, and then Chief Brannigan's book becomes more appropriate. But Know Your Buildings. Yeah, there you go. Well, reading buildings, that's another one. Building instruction. This one's called Knowing Your Buildings. I guarantee you, if you take a look at that book, you will have it as mandatory reading in your fire academy tomorrow. You'll have it on your reading list for company officer, engineer, and probably a captain and whatever your district battalion chief level is. It is a phenomenally well done. It's 190 pages, but each page is like 90% photographs and 10% writing, and it's done alphabetically. And it dawned on me that to Nick's point, not only do we need to be up to date, but we need to match. In other words, you wouldn't walk into a recruit class and start talking about a 4-to-1 advantage on a mechanical lift and a truck. You'd come in and say, this is the overhand knot, this is a bowline on a bite, this is you have to make it digestible. And if I was you, Steve, I would check the harnesses on those guys, because I think the one guy hasn't. I had to go there, right? I just had to go. The painters in the window are priceless. It's priceless. Steve works in a fire department that can hire painters. The rest of us would be out there with a brush and a bucket.
Roll it right now.
You want fresh paint, pal? Here you go. Or be a recruit class, and we'd be disguising it as learning how to work off the tower. You'd have the academy tower out there, and the recruits would be painting. Well, I know that might be recruits painting, but Steve does work in a Republican ghetto with track mansions, so he's covered. He doesn't have that. I'm just teasing, but I think that it dawned on me, and I think that that's one of the things too, that besides Nick's point about being up to date, make sure that you don't overwhelm people. Give them an opportunity to discover and learn at a pace that's manageable, right? Because when you think about this gig, and the NFPA is currently condensing all our standards into one. All the trainings, like 101 is going away, and it's going to be like they're consolidating them. I'm not really. So it's going to be interesting in 2025 what comes out. I think it'll be released 2024, will be available 2025. It's going to be really interesting to see what they do there. I love to see that process, right? And it's interesting. It would be interesting to find out what the logic was behind all of that, and because that's going to be a volume. I mean, that's going to make Dostoevsky and Tolstoy jealous, because that's going to be a big book. And probably every bit as tragic as every piece of
to read that.
The beautiful thing about Russian literature is you read a chapter and you think, well, it can't get any worse. And you get to the next chapter and you go, oh my God. It's like the Russians are the most pessimistic people in the world for good reason. It can always get worse. So I think that window, that his point is right. And I agree with Steve. The great things about the Humpday Hangouts is they, you never know where they're going to go. I don't care what the topic is. And B, we hear from people like you guys that are just amazing and just always and inspiring. And I think that's a big part of, molding leaders as well, is to provide an example that is uplifting and not deflating. I've been accused of being a cheerleader for the fire service, and I absolutely accept that title. I am a cheerleader for the fire service.
I think that's key. We got to all be cheerleaders for our profession. We're losing that in the fire service, and losing that sight of how great this is.
I'm an unapologetic firefighter. Unapologetic. You could never get me to, and I've been getting beat up lately. I have a nice guy who reached out to me and said he's disturbed by my positive attitude. I'm like, okay. My positive attitude is making him unhappy. All right.
Needs to see somebody.
Curb your enthusiasm.
We are right at an hour, so it's been a great talk as always with you gentlemen. Get some final thoughts, Chief Halton. Final thoughts today.
Yeah, my heart and prayers go out to all of our friends in Florida. My goodness, what an incredibly overwhelming moment in time. I know there are many firefighters who've lost their homes and their possessions, and so please let me know if there's anything we can do here at Fire Engineering to help. If there's any, GoFundMe's or Give Send Goes, which is a much better site, by the way, than the highly corrupt GoFundMe site. Anyway, there's much better sites for that. And if we can help in any way, we'd love to help. And I just can't imagine what the good folks down there are going through. And to all our compatriots who've on their USAR teams and their FAST teams that are down there assisting our friends in Florida, tip of the hat to you all, because that's God's work there when you go down and it'll take years. I remember when Homewood was leveled, Steve, and you probably were a youngster back then, but when Homewood, Florida was, I can't remember what hurricane that was, but literally it's what spurned the Florida building codes.
Hurricane Andrew.
That was Andrew. Okay. And it was fascinating. Our good friends in Naples, whose buildings were, they're pillboxes. The Germans would be envious of how well built Florida structures are, but that doesn't stop water. I mean, and so, just that keeping everybody's mind that we tend to move on to the next thing very quickly in America these days, but please don't forget those good people and all the firefighters down there who are making a difference. And if we can help, please reach out and let me know how we can help.
Awesome. Thank you. Stephen, what do you got, Chief Shaw?
So just to wrap up what we were talking about today, and I appreciate the conversation. This is good stuff. That first year is critically important, from transitioning from what somebody's learned in the academy to get them through for minimum standards, to get them just on a baseline, and that the opportunities that present themselves during that academy you have in your individual agencies, whether it's a week, a month, 3 months, or 6, whatever that looks like. That's our opportunity to make sure we teach them our ways, our culture, not only the skills, not only the strategies and tactics and chain of command and all that jazz, but all the other parts that come with that, about what your culture looks like, what the expectations are, how to survive a potentially 30-year career, and that every day is an opportunity. I would say the last thing I'll say is this. After that first year, what I've typically seen is that the vast majority of people after that first year have a choice. They can either go off to that first year after that required training is done and all the people are looking at them after that first year. Okay, well, our eyes are off you. Do what you want to do. You can either kind of do one of these things where you have the downward trend, where you're kind of just not training as much, eating too much, sitting in the recliner too much, and just kind of fading into the background. Or you can take the other direction and head up. You can start attending conferences. You can start becoming involved in your agencies, whether it's committees, competition teams, a variety of ways of getting involved. Learn how to play a bagpipes, for God's sake, whatever that looks like in your agency. There's so many ways to get involved. And I think that is what we need to make sure we teach our folks these days. And how do we do that? We model it. We do that. We get involved. We are involved. We're getting involved in the committees. We're getting involved off-duty events. We're participating. We're having conversations. We show them what that looks like. Not just telling them what to do, but showing them, modeling. And Chief Halton mentioned it before, that modeling is so important. So that after that first year, they know that it's not like an option. We want you to be involved. We want you to better this organization, improve it, and leave it better than the way you found it. So there's a lot. I'm glad we had this conversation today. I'm glad that this isn't, I love that we go different directions. I love the content. It's leaving me hungry for the next one. It's leaving me hungry for more conversations, but I hope that the listeners are seeing what those opportunities are and garner something from this. But yeah, those are just my last thoughts. That idea of what do you do during that first year, and then what do you do afterwards, and then modeling that behavior. So good conversation today.
Awesome. Chief Simmons, what about you? What are your final thoughts for today?
Hello, fire service personnel. The future continues to look and be bright for us. It's our responsibility to keep that fire lit as it relates to training and education. In particular, company officers, it's your responsibility to make sure the men and women who are working with you, working under you, working for you are highly competent. Training and education is foundational to success. Success meaning handling an emergency, and equally important, making sure that we as professional firefighters come back home to our loved ones in the same capacity that we left them the day before or 2 days before, whatever shift schedule you work on. Thank you, and thank you.
Awesome. Well, wrapping up, we'll throw, obviously the kind of get off topic a little bit, but it's a great conversation like we've all talked about today. That first year is critically important to set the foundation for that successful 30 years. And, we've all talked about it. You have a choice. You can either look at those things as obstacles or opportunities. And you look at the people that are on this call today, none of us, and I shouldn't say that, I'll speak for myself. When I started as a firefighter, I never thought I'd be doing anything I'm doing today. And podcasts or Humpday Hangouts or anything with fire engineering wasn't even in the wheelhouse. But the fire service can afford you a tremendous amount of opportunities. Talking with gentlemen from across the country and meeting people and having conversations like this. So the sky's the limit. It's your opportunity, what you want to do with your career. And so if you take that trajectory correctly, you never stop learning. You take opportunities to go to conferences and meet people. The sky's the limit. So, and 5 days from now, Chief Halton, you want to plug FDIC coming up?
Well, you know what I do want to do? I want to plug Chief Shaw, because he said it best. You are never off probation. Yep. It doesn't end at your first year. It doesn't end at your 30th year. It ends when we put you in the box. I would like to say one thing to our friends in Indianapolis. Yesterday at 3 o'clock in the morning, Steve Dillman lost his battle with cancer. Steve was a 40-year veteran, a beloved member of the IFD, great friend of mine and FDIC, beautiful guy, but another firefighter gone. And he put up a heroic fight. And special thanks to my friends at the Firefighter Cancer Support Network for everything they did for Steve over the last year, helping him get to treatments and making sure he and his wife were comfortable in the hotel room. They had to travel from Indianapolis to Wisconsin. And the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, the guys from Texas, thank you for everything you did to make Steve's last year possible. And on behalf of his wife Frosty and myself and all of us who knew and loved Steve, we're in debt to the Cancer Support Network. And if you just keep his wife Frosty in your thoughts and prayers, Steve was a great firefighter and a wonderful human being, and he'll be deeply missed by all. So thank you.
All right, we'll be back in December for the next Humpday Hangout with the International Society of Fire Service Instructors. Thanks everybody for coming out.